Profit maximization in monopoly. Monopolists follow the same marginal revenue, marginal cost method for calculating the profit maximizing output as we've seen previously with perfect competition. That is, first you compare the marginal cost of producing each unit, that is the cost of producing one more unit, with the marginal revenue of that unit, that is the revenue that we get from selling one more unit. As long as marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, it's worth producing and selling another unit. And we'll find the optimal quantity at the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the same for every market structure. But the outcome of applying that rule is very different in monopoly than it was in perfect competition. This is a consequence of the fact that there's only one firm in the market. And because there's only one firm in the market, that firm faces the market downward sloping demand curve. So here's the difference between the type of demand curve that the firm sees in perfect competition versus in monopoly. Over on the left there, remember, a firm in perfect competition sees the horizontal demand curve. They can sell as much as they want, but they can only sell it at the market price. The monopolist, on the other hand, faces the market downward sloping demand curve. So if they want to sell more, they have to drop the price. Thus, in perfect competition, the firm knows that it can increase output, and if it does so, it can sell that additional output at the same price. That's why marginal revenue equals price in perfect competition. But a monopolist knows that if it wants to sell more, they will have to drop the price over all the production that they are selling because of the downward sloping demand curve. Thus, the marginal revenue of an additional unit for a monopolist, the additional unit for a monopolist brings in the revenue of that unit, that is the price at which you sell it, minus the reduction in revenue from having to sell all units of output at a new lower price. Thus, for a monopolist, marginal revenue is less than price. The amount of additional revenue you get from selling another unit is less than the price you receive for that unit. Here's the diagram explaining that. We have the downward sloping demand curve. And then below it is another downward sloping curve, which is the marginal revenue curve. And notice that at every quantity, marginal revenue is less than price. You get the price from the demand curve, but the marginal revenue is a curve that's below that. Okay, so let's go back to profit maximization for the monopolist. Monopolists, like perfectly competitive firms, follow the same rule. The profit maximizing, loss minimizing level of output is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. If at that level of output you can't at least cover variable costs, you should shut down. Okay, but here's how the monopolist applies that rule. First, you find the quantity where marginal revenue intersects marginal cost. That's the quantity I've marked there on the diagram. And then you charge the price that corresponds to that quantity on the demand curve. So find the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, then go up and get the price from the demand curve. Notice something important here. If the monopolist had made the choice like a perfectly competitive firm, choosing its quantity so that price equals marginal cost, that the monopolist would choose the point QC. Notice that that's the point you take your marginal cost curve, Where does price equal marginal cost? Well, you get that from the intersection of the marginal cost curve and the demand curve. So that would be at price PC at output level QC. But that's not what the monopolist does. The monopolist finds the quantity where marginal revenue intersects marginal cost, giving quantity QM, and then gets the price from the demand curve PM that corresponds to that how the price they could charge for that level of output given the market demand. Notice that PM, the monopolist price, is greater than PC, the price the monopolist would charge if they behaved like a perfectly competitive firm. Likewise, or actually in opposite to that, QM, the quantity that the monopolist sells, is less than QC, the quantity the monopolist would have sold if it behaved like a competitive firm. This leads to one of the most famous expressions about describing monopoly, that a monopolist produces too little at too high a price. So you can already see here that there's a very great difference in the outcome of being a monopolist versus being a competitive firm. As far as society is concerned, this monopolist is producing too little at too high a price in comparison to what a competitive firm would do. Okay, so our profit maximization rule for a monopolist is find the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost and charge the price from the demand curve that corresponds to that quantity. Let's go on to one more difference between monopolists and perfectly competitive firms. Monopolists can earn positive economic profits even in the long run. Notice over in the diagram at the right there, we found the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and then found the price corresponding to that level of revenue from the demand curve, which is P1. Notice that P1 at the optimal quantity is greater than long-run average total cost for that level of output. Therefore, this monopolist is earning positive economic profits. Now, in a competitive market, firms would enter and bid down the price so that this wouldn't exist in the long run. But that doesn't happen in monopoly because entry is impossible. That's part of our definition of a monopoly. So while in the long run, in perfect competition, competition drives entry from competitors, drives down any positive economic profits until we reach the bottom of our long-run average total cost curve. So we're guaranteed to be producing at the most efficient point. That does not happen in monopoly. In monopoly, the firm can be earning positive economic profits that are greater than long-run average total cost, and there's no guarantee that you're going to be at that most efficient level of output. So in comparison with perfect competition, two things are true. First, the firm produces too little at too high a price. And also, in the long run, it may earn supernormal profits with no fear that other firms may enter and compete down the market price. And plus, there's actually a third consequence, which is that there's no guarantee that we'll end up at that most efficient level of output. All three of these things are reasons why monopoly is disfavored over perfect competition, and the existence of monopoly is viewed as a market failure.